What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Imlowkey, and today I'm coming at you guys with my thoughts and opinions on the M8 Headless. So if you don't know what this is or what it can do, don't worry. I'm going to go into all of that in this video, and I'm also talking about the different things I like about it and who I think this device is for. So with that being said, what is the M8 Headless? In order to know what the M8 Headless is, you need to first know what the M8 Tracker is. The M8 Tracker is made by Dirty Wave, and it's a 8-track sequencer, synthesizer, and sampler. It's a portable workstation that has many capabilities. So that's the M8 Tracker, and this is the M8 Headless. So why is this one called the M8 Headless and not the M8 Tracker? This thing on the back is what makes it the Headless. This computer chip is called a Teensy 4.1, and this is basically the brains of this device, okay? So even though this looks like a retro game console, this console isn't anything but a power source, a screen, and some buttons for me to run this computer chip. This computer chip has the M8 software on it, which allows me to run the software and use all its goodness. So with that being said, what is the M8 capable of? What can it do? So like I said already, it's a synthesizer. It has a wave synth on it, a macro synth, a hyper synth, and an FN synthesizer on it. All those different synthesizers also have their own different settings and parameters that you can change within them. You can change things like the wave shape, you can change the timbre, you can add a filter to it, you can have tons of different modulations on it, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. You can also sample into it using a USB line or the audio input line, I believe, if you have the actual M8 Tracker. And since I have the Headless version, this little console doesn't have an audio in, just a 3.5 out. And then we also have this USB port. So if I want to actually sample into it, I'd need a splitter to where I can plug in the Teensy and I can plug in my audio source. So that's that. But you can also load sounds onto here using a micro SD card. So let's actually disassemble this and I'll show you guys what the brains of this actually looks like. Let's go ahead and turn this off. So let's go ahead and take off the 3D printed enclosure. This is the little enclosure. The homie Taki actually assembled this for me and he did just a great job. He super glued this wire, the 3D enclosure, Velcro strips, and this little chip. This is the brains. This is the Teensy 4.1, and as you can see right here, we have a micro SD card. This is about 128 gigs, I believe. And yeah, this little black piece is a heat sink because this gets pretty hot. So yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more later in the video, but this is pretty much the setup. You have your console, your Teensy, as well as the SD card. We also have an enclosure, which I kind of modified already, and it's a little bit warped because this plastic isn't really that heat resistant, and your USB wire. With these simple and affordable supplies, you can have yourself a M8 Headless for somewhere around 80 to 200 bucks. Even more if you really want to get creative and customize your setup to be perfect. And I've seen some pretty nice setups on the internet so far. The M8 actually has a pretty nice community that I wasn't even aware of, and they have so much knowledge, whether if it's about the M8 Tracker or setting up an M8 Headless, which isn't that hard. And yeah, within my first week of using this, I've been looking up those forums, going into different Discord servers, and also watching tons of YouTube videos. So how have I been using this? Lately, for the past week, I've been making short loops. I've been really just trying to get my head around this thing and figure out how to make music on it. It's a pretty intimidating process in the beginning just because, I mean, look at this. It looks like you're looking into the Matrix. All you see are 2-digit symbols, either numbers or letters. At first, it makes no sense, especially if you don't have access to the manual or you haven't watched any videos, you're not gonna know what to do. But like I said, for the past week, I've been sampling, exploring the synthesis capabilities on here, trying to make my own different synth sounds, and really just getting comfortable with it. My first day was a little bit of a headache because I just couldn't figure out how to do the simplest things. But after a few searches and a couple of hours, it started to make sense and I started to see the capabilities of it. Another thing is that I also noticed how different the workflow was compared to something like a P6 or a SP404 or even a DAW like Ableton. I feel like the workflow is definitely unique due to how small this device is and how the navigation system is set up. I'm hoping to soon evolve out of the short loop phase and actually make a full beat and render that beat out. You can render beats on here, and you can also render out your stems. So if you want to bring the stems from the M8 to something like Ableton, you can also do that, which is, again, amazing. So what do I like about it? The main thing is definitely going to be the portability. Even though this isn't the M8 tracker, this is the M8 Headless, and it's still very, very portable. And I guess that really just depends on which form factor you choose. Whether if you choose this kind of game console, or if you choose the brick console, or the console, I believe it's Tremiu, I believe that's what it's called, which it basically looks like a PSP. But besides the portability, I also love the customization. The fact that all you really need is the Teensy chip, a USB wire, a game console, and a computer to actually download the software onto the Teensy. It's pretty sick because you can really get crazy with the customization. This setup was assembled by the homie Taki, and he just did a great job by making this a very neat and packaged device. He hot glued this USB wire to the back so that it's not dangling around. He hot glued the Velcro strip onto the console. He also had the 3D printed enclosure for the Teensy. Now, if you think this looks cool or looks, pretty badass, it gets way better. Trust me. Just do a quick M8 Headless setup search on YouTube. You guys will see some setups that look very, very professional. I'm actually planning on getting another console and maybe another Teensy chip, just so I can have a form factor that I think I will enjoy more, something with a bigger screen, a higher resolution screen, and just higher quality build. I believe this console was about somewhere around 30 bucks. Same for the Teensy chip, so that's about 60 bucks. Get you an SD card, that can range anywhere from like 20, 40, 50 bucks depending on which size you get. You can really have a solid setup for the $100 to $200 price range, and it's just crazy. I'm not gonna lie. But more on about what I like about it. So I already discussed the portability, I already discussed the customization, I just discussed the price, which I also love about it. But let's talk about the workflow. I said that the workflow on here is unique. Due to it being a unique workflow, it's something that's different, and it makes me think. It makes me think outside the box, and it helps me come up with ideas that I usually wouldn't come up with. And the last thing that I like about the M8 is the possibilities. You can really come up with some really dope music, and due to the different features on here, like the effects and the modulations, you can do things like create your own sidechain, make LFO sound effects, and really just dive into a whole nother world of sound design on this small little form factor. Now, even though there's things that I do like about it, there's a few things that I don't like about it. The first one being the navigation. Now, while I did say that it's a unique workflow due to the navigation, it takes some getting used to. It took me a while to get used to it, and I'm still not used to it, just because it's so different. Since there's not that many buttons on this device, some buttons might have multiple different functions, so it takes a little bit of getting used to, and I'd recommend having just some form of a reference up, just so you can remember and you can really utilize the shortcuts and build up some speed. Because other than that, it'll feel like a very tedious process if you weren't using the proper shortcuts, or if you weren't navigating through this device properly. Another thing I don't like about the M8 is that it can be pretty intimidating when you don't have a plan. So if I'm just going into this thing without really an idea of what I'm about to do, I probably won't make some good music. I've made a few beats on here that just do not sound appealing to the human ears, okay? I'm not ashamed to say that, because like I said, if you don't have a plan on here, it's going to be kind of hard to come up with something that sounds really good, compared to if you have an idea of how you want to chop up a sample, or you have an idea of a synth that you want to use. Maybe you've already designed a synth sound and you want to use that synth sound. Then it starts becoming more of a streamlined process. But like I said, you can't just go in here, doodle around, and come up with some dope ideas, just because of how many possibilities there are and how tedious it can be to sequence different things on here. Things like a synth, you have to trigger when it starts, but you also have to trigger when it turns off. If you want to get swing on your drums, you have to go ahead and input a certain amount of ticks of delay on each sound that you want to have swing to. Like I said, it can just get very, very tedious, and I mean, I guess that's just a bullet that I'm gonna have to bite, but that's just one thing that I wish was different about it. Another thing that I don't really enjoy about the headless version, at least, is how hot the Teensy actually gets. This thing gets very, very hot. Even without the heat sink, before this was even applied, the plastic was melting, which is understandable because this plastic isn't really that heat resistant. But with this heat sink out, there's been some times where I've been cooking up and I might touch this thing accidentally, and it doesn't leave a burn or anything, but it is pretty hot. You definitely do feel it. And even just sitting down, you know, making beats on it, I just get physically hot using it because I feel like the heat just emits off of it and just creates like this warm aura near me, you know? So I definitely like to run something like a portable fan near me, just to run it either on it or just somewhere around me, just so I don't be literally cooking up, you know? And one last thing that I don't like about the M8 is that there's not really a way for you to perform sounds. Compared to something like the P6, if I had some drums on these pads, I can just easily rehearse these sounds, these pads, and see what pattern I want to get. Or if I have some sample chops on here, I can go ahead, see what pattern I like, and come up with some good ideas or whatever. Then I can go ahead, hit record, and get that down. Compared to the M8, you have to actually sequence your chops. So you have to lay down where you want them to start, you have to choose the endpoint, and you kind of just have to have an idea of what you want to chop, or where you want to chop, or how you want to chop it, or where you want to place this chop at, and where you want to place that one at, and how much delay you want to add to it so that it can trigger at the right time. Like I said, it just gets very tedious, but I mean, that's something that I'm not really too worried about, because I understand that as I use this device more, my workflow is going to increase, and that tedious process, it's not going to be too much of an issue once I get all the shortcuts down and get my speed down. So with that being said, who is it for? I definitely would not recommend this to new beat makers. If you're new to making beats, if you're brand new and you're thinking about getting this for a first piece of device to make music on, do not do that. Don't do that, because it takes some kind of experience to know what you're doing. You know, you need to kind of have an idea of how you want things to sound, where you want things to be at in order for you to get a good result. So with that being said, I definitely recommend this to maybe an intermediate to advanced producer, someone who's used different samplers, someone who's had experience with using DAWs, and definitely somebody who has an experience using trackers. This might make a little bit of sense to you because it's kind of a similar concept, you know, just packaged in a different way. I'd also recommend this to stealthy beat makers, okay? So people that like to make beats on the go, somebody who wants to make a beat on the train, someone who wants to make a beat on the bus, someone who wants to make a beat at the table, you know, when they just finish eating lunch or something. They just pull out the pocket, pull out your bag, start making some beats real quick, get like a cool little 5-minute, 10-minute cook up, bam, get back to work or whatever. I definitely recommend it to someone who's going for that style of making beats. Like I said, if you're on the go and you want to have a portable workstation in your pocket, this is a pretty good device to set up. I'd also recommend this to someone who doesn't mind that hands-on experience. So like I said, it's very tedious. There's a lot of different inputs you have to program, and you know, with that being said, you have a lot of control over the result of the sound. So if you don't mind that, if you don't mind having that much control, I definitely recommend it to you, because the way I see it is like a sandbox. I feel like almost anything is possible, and I just have to figure out how to get from point A to point B. When the homie Taki was showing me how to use it, he was showing me some of the beats that he made with his, and guys, those beats were super duper dope. And it's like, even just thinking of how he came up with those beats or those sounds that he designed on the M8, it just really showed me what it's capable of. And even he was saying that he didn't know everything about it and that he's still learning about it. So it really does get me excited to dive into it and just study it. The fact that it's not easy, the fact that it does have a learning curve or a skill gap or whatever you want to say, that kind of appeals to me, because I like a challenge. At my point in my music making journey, I'm kind of looking for a challenge. I'm kind of looking for limitations. I'm kind of looking for something that's going to push me to think harder, you know, compared to something that's just a little bit too easy, you know, something like Ableton or even a SP404 Mark II. Those are some really good things to make music on because they're really easy and it's really easy to get ideas out on them. It's not too easy to get ideas out on the M8 tracker unless you know what you're doing. So with that being said, I'm going to conclude this video. So far, a week after using this thing, I'm in love with the M8 Headless. I definitely recommend this to someone who is interested in it. I mean, it's pretty affordable. It's not like it's going to break the bank if you set up your own M8 Headless. And if you get tired of that DIY look and feel of your own setup, you can go ahead and invest in the actual M8 tracker, you know? So with that being said, you guys, that's how I feel about the M8 Headless about a week after using it and exploring it and making a few different beats on it. If any of you guys have an M8 tracker or an M8 Headless, feel free to share your thoughts down below in the comment section and just share your experience with it. How do you feel about it? Do you agree with some of the things that I said in this video? Do you disagree? Does it resonate with you? And if you don't have an M8, let me know if you're interested. Do you think that this is something that you can use, or do you think that it's a bit too intimidating for you? But with that being said, you guys, that's going to do it for this video. I'll see you on the next one. Make sure you check out the Imlowkey shop if you want some sample packs. Peace.